The scorching asphalt of Fifth Avenue in New York City burned beneath her bare, dirty feet. The stench of garbage and despair mingled with the aroma of expensive perfumes and luxury car exhausts. She, with tangled hair and a face covered in grime, eyes wide with terror and confusion, seemed a cruel mirage amidst the opulence. Her brown shirt, torn and filthy, barely covered skin marked by the streets. Beside her, a boy, also dirty and with his mouth agape in shock, pointed a trembling finger. And then the voice, a voice that to her was just a distant noise, but to the man in the impeccable suit and wristwatch, worth more than many people's entire lives, it was a cry from the soul. His eyes, once focused on the coldness of business, now reflected an indescribable terror, his mouth agape in a mixture of disbelief and pain. The scene was a punch to the gut, a mirror of human fragility, of the thin line that separates everything from nothing, luxury from misery. How could someone who once wore silk and diamonds, who strolled through art galleries and dined in Michelin-starred restaurants, be there, reduced to a shadow, a ghost amidst the indifferent crowd? The question hung in the air, heavy and cruel, while the world around continued to spin, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding right there in plain sight. Now, I'm going to ask you to click subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. Arthur Caldwell's life was a monument to ambition and success. His days were filled with meetings in glass and steel skyscrapers, decisions that moved markets, and the acquisition of assets most people only saw in magazines. His fortune, built with intelligence and a touch of ruthlessness, was measured in billions of dollars, and his name was synonymous with power on Wall Street. He owned a penthouse overlooking Central Park, a collection of sports cars that would make any enthusiast drool, and a private jet that took him anywhere in the world in a matter of hours. However, behind the facade of invincibility, there was an open wound, an absence that all the money in the world could not fill. 5 years ago, his wife Eleanor had disappeared without a trace. The police, the most expensive private detectives, the media, everyone had been mobilized, but she simply vanished. Arthur, a man who controlled empires, felt powerless in the face of that mystery. His son, little Ethan, then just 3 years old, barely remembered his mother's face, only a vague memory of a gentle smile and a sweet scent. Eleanor's absence transformed Arthur. He became more reclusive, more focused on work, as if accumulating wealth could somehow compensate for the loss. His bespoke suits from Savile Row, his Patek Philippe watches, and his handmade crocodile leather shoes were an armor against pain, a constant reminder that he was a man of possessions, even if the most valuable possession of all had been snatched from him. That day, Arthur was taking Ethan for lunch at a sophisticated restaurant, one of the few times he allowed himself to slow down. Ethan, impeccably dressed in a navy blue polo shirt and khaki pants, his blonde hair neatly combed, looked like a little prince. They walked along the busy sidewalk, the city's hum serving as a soundtrack to their luxurious routine. Arthur, with his trained eye for identifying opportunities and threats, scanned the crowd, but his thoughts were far away, on the spreadsheets and charts that awaited him. Suddenly, Ethan stopped abruptly, pulling Arthur's hand. "Daddy, look!" the boy said, his voice choked with a mixture of awe and fear. Arthur followed his son's gaze and his world collapsed. There, amidst the dirt and chaos of the street, was a woman. Her eyes, large and frightened, were a familiar brown, a brown he had kissed 1,000 times. Her face, though dirty and thin, had unmistakable features. Her hair, once silky and shiny, was now a tangled mess of knots and grime. Her clothes, a dark brown shirt, were torn and stained, very different from the designer dresses Eleanor used to wear. The Rolex watch he wore on his wrist seemed to weigh a ton, an empty symbol of a success that could not protect him from that brutal reality. The thin city air seemed to have been sucked from his lungs. It was her. It was Eleanor, but not the Eleanor he knew. It was a broken version, a shadow, a painful reminder of what had been lost. The shock paralyzed him, made him forget for a moment who he was, what he had. The only thing that mattered was that woman, his wife, there on the street like a homeless person. The image was so powerful, so overwhelming, that Arthur felt his stomach churn. The boy, Ethan, still pointed, his mouth in a perfect O, his eyes fixed on the dirty figure. Arthur, the magnate who negotiated millions without batting an eyelid, felt his legs weaken. The voice he heard coming from his own throat didn't sound like his. It was a hoarse whisper, almost inaudible. "Eleanor," he managed to stammer, the word laden with a pain and hope he had buried long ago. The woman did not react to the name. Her brown eyes, so familiar yet so strange, only stared at him with a mixture of fear and incomprehension. She didn't recognize him. She didn't recognize the man who loved her, who built an empire for her, who searched for her tirelessly for 5 long years. She didn't recognize their son, little Ethan, who now clung to Arthur's leg, frightened. The reality, cold and cruel, hit Arthur with the force of a train. She was alive, but she wasn't there. Her mind, her memory, everything that made her Eleanor, had been lost somewhere, sometime. That encounter, which should have been a miracle, turned into an even greater nightmare. The surrounding luxury, the designer store windows, the imported cars passing by, everything seemed to mock his helplessness. Money, which had always been his most powerful tool, was useless now. It couldn't bring back Eleanor's memories. It couldn't heal the wound in his soul. The hustle and bustle of Fifth Avenue seemed amplified, each sound a hammer striking Arthur's head. He knelt, ignoring the curious glances of passers-by, and tried to approach Eleanor. "Eleanor, it's me, Arthur, and this is our son, Ethan," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The woman recoiled, her eyes still wide, like a cornered animal. She showed no recognition, only an instinctive fear. Ethan, sensing his father's anguish, began to cry softly, clinging to Arthur's leg. The scene was a brutal contrast. The man in the expensive suit and the well-dressed boy kneeling on the sidewalk, trying to reach a dirty, frightened woman who seemed not to belong in that world. Arthur knew he had to act calmly, that any sudden movement could scare her even more. He slowly extended his hand, offering her a clean handkerchief he took from his suit pocket. "Please, don't be afraid. I want to help you," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. Eleanor hesitated, her eyes fixed on the handkerchief, then on Arthur's face. There was a spark of curiosity in her gaze, but fear still predominated. She didn't take the handkerchief. Arthur stood up, his heart pounding. He knew he couldn't force her. The priority now was to get her off the street, take her to a safe place where she could be cared for. He pulled out his cell phone, a state-of-the-art model that cost the equivalent of many people's annual salaries, and called his personal assistant, Marcus. "Marcus, I need you to come to Fifth Avenue, near the Tiffany's store. Bring a discreet car and a medical team. It's urgent. I found Eleanor," he said, his voice firm, despite the internal tremor. Marcus, accustomed to Arthur's unusual demands, asked no questions. Within minutes, a black, unmarked car pulled discreetly to the curb. A team of paramedics, instructed to be as discreet as possible, exited the vehicle. Their presence, however, frightened Eleanor. She tried to run, but Arthur was faster. With a gentle but firm movement, he held her arm. "No, Eleanor, please. We won't hurt you. We want to help you," he pleaded. Her struggle was weak, her physical strength clearly debilitated by life on the streets. The paramedics, with Arthur's help, managed to calm her down, and with great care, took her to the car. Ethan, still frightened, was hugged by Arthur, who tried to reassure him. "Mommy is sick, son, but we're going to take care of her," he said, his voice choked. The journey to the private hospital, one of the most renowned in the city, was silent. Eleanor was huddled in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the window, as if the world outside was an incomprehensible blur. Arthur watched her, every detail of her dirty, tired face, every movement of her fragile body. The pain in his chest was almost unbearable. He had dreamed of this moment for years, but never imagined it would be like this. The Eleanor he loved, the vibrant and full-of-life woman, seemed to have been replaced by a stranger. At the hospital, she was taken to a private suite, away from curious eyes. A team of doctors and nurses, all under Arthur's command, began to evaluate her. The initial diagnosis confirmed what Arthur already suspected: severe malnutrition, dehydration, physical and mental exhaustion, and dissociative amnesia, likely caused by severe trauma. The news, though expected, was still a blow. Eleanor was alive, but her mind was trapped somewhere in a labyrinth of lost memories. Arthur sat by the bed, holding her hand, which was cold and rough. Ethan, after being comforted by a nurse, fell asleep in a nearby armchair. Arthur watched Eleanor's sleeping face, the marks of the street still visible, and promised himself he would do everything to bring her back. He would spend every penny of his fortune, if necessary. Money, which was once an end in itself, was now just a means to a greater purpose: Eleanor's recovery. If you are moved by this story, imagine what else we can share. Leave a comment below and tell us what you thought of this reunion. Your opinion is very important to us. The days that followed were a whirlwind of medical appointments, therapies, and attempts at reconnection. Arthur hired the best neurologists and psychologists in the country, sparing no expense. Eleanor's suite at the hospital became a high-tech treatment center with state-of-the-art equipment and a dedicated 24-hour team. She received the best food, the best medicines, and was constantly monitored. Slowly, very slowly, Eleanor's body began to recover. Her skin regained some of its glow, her eyes lost some of their fear, and the expression of confusion diminished. However, her memory remained a blank. She didn't recognize Arthur, nor Ethan, nor the photos of her past life that he showed her. It was as if her mind was a blank canvas, waiting to be filled again. Arthur spent hours by her side, telling stories of their past together, showing videos and photo albums. He talked about the day they met, about their wedding, about Ethan's birth, about the trips they took, about the happy moments they shared. He described the details of their home, the art objects they collected, the jewelry he had given her, like the diamond necklace she wore on their wedding day, or the sapphire ring he gave her on Ethan's first birthday. He mentioned the luxury brands she so appreciated, like Chanel, Hermès, Louis Vuitton, hoping that some word, some name, could spark a flicker of recognition. Ethan, with the innocence and resilience of a child, also tried to connect with his mother. He drew for her, sang songs that Arthur said Eleanor used to sing to him, and brought his favorite toys to the suite. Sometimes, Eleanor smiled at him, a weak smile, but one that filled Arthur's heart with hope. It was a sign, however small, that something was changing. The medical team was cautious, explaining to Arthur that memory recovery was an unpredictable process and that it could take time, or perhaps never happen completely. But Arthur refused to give up. He believed that love, persistence, and all the resources he had at his disposal could somehow break the barriers of amnesia. He remembered how Eleanor used to say that money couldn't buy happiness, but it could buy opportunities. And now he was using every opportunity his money could provide to bring her back. He didn't care about the cost, about the millions he was spending. The only currency that mattered was Eleanor's memory, the chance to have his wife back. Eleanor and Arthur's story began to spread, first among the hospital staff, then to the media, who treated it sensationally. Arthur, however, shielded Eleanor from any unnecessary exposure, ensuring her privacy. He knew her recovery was the most important thing. Each day, he saw small progress. She began to eat on her own, walk the hospital corridors, and interact more with the staff. One day, as Arthur was reading a book to her, she looked at him and said, "Your voice is familiar." It was the first complete sentence she had said to him, and to Arthur, it sounded like the most beautiful symphony. It was a small step, but a significant one. He felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of joy and relief. That moment, simple and profound, was worth more than all his stock market shares, more than all his material possessions. It was proof that Eleanor was there, somewhere, fighting to come back. If you are feeling touched by this journey of love and overcoming, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more heartwarming stories. And if you have experienced something similar, or know someone who has overcome a great difficulty, share your experience in the comments. Your story can inspire many other people. The familiarity in Arthur's voice was the first thread, the first link that began to pull Eleanor back from the abyss. From that day on, small fragments began to emerge. A smell of coffee, a distant melody, the color of a sunset. Each of these stimuli was like a small piece of a giant puzzle slowly fitting together. Arthur and Ethan continued to be her anchor, patient and persistent. They took her for short walks in the hospital garden, where the smell of grass and the singing of birds seemed to awaken something in her. Arthur, always attentive, noticed that she reacted differently to certain songs, especially those they used to listen to together. He then created a playlist with her favorite songs and played them softly in the suite. Gradually, Eleanor's eyes began to shine with deeper recognition. She began to call Ethan by name, and one day, as Arthur was reading to her, she interrupted him and completed a sentence he had started. It was a sentence from a book they loved, a literary classic they had read together many times. The most impactful moment, the true turning point, happened on a sunny day. Arthur had brought Ethan to visit Eleanor, and they were sitting on the suite sofa, flipping through an old photo album. Arthur pointed to a wedding photo where Eleanor looked stunning in her wedding dress, and he, by her side with a radiant smile. "Remember, Eleanor, our wedding. You were so beautiful," he said, his voice full of affection. Eleanor looked at the photo, then at Arthur, and then at Ethan, her eyes filled with tears, and a sob escaped her throat. "Arthur," she whispered, the name coming out with difficulty, but with a clarity he hadn't heard in years. "My love, I remember." Now the words were like lightning, an electric shock that ran through Arthur's body. He hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face. Ethan, confused at first but sensing his father's joy, also hugged his mother. It was a triple reunion, a moment of pure emotion that sealed Eleanor's return. She still had a long way to go, her memory was still fragmented, but the essence of who she was there, back. Eleanor's recovery was a testament to the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. She left the hospital a few weeks later, returning to the home that was once hers, but which now seemed like a new place. Arthur, with the help of therapists, continued to guide her on her recovery journey. They revisited places, met old friends, and Eleanor, little by little, filled in the gaps in her memory. The luxurious life, the expensive cars, the jewelry, and the designer clothes all acquired new meaning. They were no longer just symbols of status, but reminders of a life she almost lost, and that Arthur fought to bring back. The experience transformed her. She became more grateful, more aware of the fragility of life and the importance of human connections. Arthur, in turn, learned that the greatest wealth was not in his bank account, but in the family he had rediscovered. This story is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can emerge. If you were moved by Eleanor and Arthur's journey, like this video and share it with your friends and family. Who knows, maybe this story can inspire someone you know. And to not miss any of our next stories, how about subscribing to the channel right now? If you've made it this far, I've left a story that I'm sure you'll like. It's right here on the screen. Just click. See you there.